project scope management. Like I said, we've just gone through the first knowledge area. Remember that we are reviewing this work, we are reviewing this learning in line with project management body of knowledge, the 5th edition. And as we progress, we'll look at the 6th and the 7th edition. So this will provide us with foundational information, foundational knowledge as regards to the knowledge areas. And as we progress, we'll get to see more of what is expected in project management in the later editions. Now, let's move on to looking at the introduction of what the scope management is. Now, the scope is, in simple terms, breaking down your project into smaller manageable units, smaller manageable tasks, smaller manageable elements. That's what you want to do. You want to have a breakdown of activities that can easily be managed. And remember that this scope plan is a component of the project management plan. So we are beginning to look at the other planning processes in the project management plan. The project management plan is an output of the project integration management plan, but the project management plan on its own is an integrated element. It is a composition of different subsets of the entire project. So now I want to look at these interdependent plans and how each of them play along. So at each of them, we still look at the processes involved in them, and then we'll look at the process methodologies involving the input tools and techniques and the outputs for each of them, and then we'll move on. Now, by introduction, this knowledge area focuses on defining and controlling the project scope. It ensures that the project delivers the right products or services according to what was agreed upon with stakeholders. Now, while we were dealing with the project integration management, there is a process there that we looked at defining the charter. And one of the tools and techniques we needed to define the charter, we called it facilitation and meetings, where we needed to discuss with the stakeholders to know exactly what their expectations are. So now that we know what their expectations are, the scope is saying, let's break our work down so that we can get the results that these stakeholders are expecting. Okay, so think of it as defining the place plot and ensuring the production stays focused on the script. What are the benefits of effective scope management? It provides clarity and alignment. So the smaller the project, or the more you are able to break down the project into smaller units, the more it's easier for you to understand, or easier for you to handle, okay, and easier for you to checkmate if it is actually in the right direction or not. Then it provides improved project estimate. This is very, very important. The project estimate in terms of timeline, project estimate in terms of cost, project estimate in terms of all resources involved, because all the resources, all the time will be allocated to define tasks in the scope. Then there is also reduced risk. With a well-defined scope, it's easier for you to know what risk is involved in each of the elements, in each of the tasks defined. With the scope, it's easier for you to know where the risks reside. Then it also ensures enhanced stakeholder satisfaction. This is so because by the time the stakeholder knows what is happening and what is going to happen, the person will be rest assured that his or her work will get the required result. Now, what are the key processes involved in project scope management? The first thing is collect requirements. The second thing is define scope. The third thing is create work breakdown structure, or WBS. The next one is for you to verify the scope. And the last one is for you to control the scope. By the time we get to the 6th and 7th editions, we also see modifications here that we'll now take care of. But at this point, let's understand this and deal with it. Now, let's deal with the first process, which is collect requirement. Whenever we say collect requirement is basically going to understand the requirements of the stakeholders, the needs, the expectations of the stakeholders, and then gathering the necessary data to make sure that we understand this requirement. And also in collecting requirements in business formats now, we are trying to ensure that the needs of the project aligns with the needs of the business. That's project goals aligning with business goals. Okay, so this brings us to traceability, ensuring that whatever be the requirement is going to be to the benefit of the business and the stakeholders involved. Now, let's move on and see what we have there. The collect requirement process is crucial for defining what the project will deliver. So when you have a definition of the product, when you have a definition of the service, when you have a definition of the outcome, the output, the impact of the proposed project, you have to now collect requirements to be sure that that particular output, outcome, expectation, need will be delivered. It is the process of defining and documenting stakeholders' needs to meet the project activities. It is like gathering all the ingredients and instructions needed for a successful recipe, in this case, your project. Now, what are the inputs in collecting requirements? Number one, you need the project management plan. So with the project management plan, it is easier to search out for inputs. It is easier to look out for if the requirements will be met or not. Then you have your project documents. Your project documents, most of them have outlined your product description, your business cases, your feasibility reports, and all of that. And they provided you with the background information you needed to carry out your project. So the project document will also be good as part of the input for requirements. They have your stakeholders register where you documented all your stakeholders, their needs, their expectation, their roles, responsibilities, their impact and influence on the project, and then how you're going to manage them in the project. So all of this will be captured and then put as input. Now, what are the tools and techniques for collecting this requirement? You can do this through interviews and meetings. It can be through face-to-face discussion with your stakeholders so that it can help you understand what they really mean. Okay? And then you can also try doing the focus groups where you bring together a group of stakeholders to spark creative ideas and identify potential conflicts in requirements. So you can do that in focus group. The focus group will now be like a sample of the entire stakeholders involved in the project. And with their initiative, their creativity, you can draft information as part of requirements for the project. Then you have document analysis, all the documents that exist. Okay, all the documents that exist. All the that exist, okay, you can review them, your standards, your manuals, your templates, your procedures, review them to be sure that those documents are still relevant in collecting requirements. Still on tools and techniques, you have questionnaires and surveys. Some of your stakeholders might be too busy that you don't have the time for a face-to-face interview. So you can use questionnaires, you can use surveys. It might be manual surveys, it might be online surveys. It's left for you. Then another way is to build prototypes. When you have brainstormed, when you have acted on stakeholders' needs, you can come up with a prototype, a simple design of experiment to show them, is this what you mean? Okay, they look at it and tell you, okay, this, we need this, we need that. So it gives room for creative modeling or simulations to make sure that project stakeholders can visualize what the end result will look like. And then they will also give you feedback on requirements. Then you have observations. Yes, some stakeholders might not be the ones that will talk as much as you want, but through their actions, through their words, through their inactions, you can observe and know what they really want. Okay. On the output, you have requirements documentation, you have requirements traceability matrix, and you have updates to the project document. Now, I will want to discuss 1 and 2, which is requirement documentation and traceability matrix. Updates on project document 1, the standard one, because by the time we get feedback from stakeholders, by the time we get all the changes coming in, we are required to update our documents and all of that and make sure that they are in good. But the requirements documentation, I talked about agreements earlier when we looked at in this developing project charter. I would say one of the inputs we talked about business case, we talked about agreements. Then we talked about ES, we talked about OPAs, and every other thing that follows suit. In talking about agreements, remember that you having the meeting, facilitations and meeting and negotiation with your stakeholders, you are expected to draft out agreements. So to help you draft out agreement, draft out MOUs, be sure that you and your stakeholders are on the same page. You need to have a documentation of all the requirements that the stakeholders are giving you, so that when you are drafting your agreement documents, like your MOUs, your service level agreements, maybe financial disbursement agreement and all of that, you will understand yourself and you'll be on the same page. So this requirement documentation is, this formal document captures the agreed upon project requirements, including functional and non-functional agreement, along with acceptance criteria. So imagine the final documented recipe outlining ingredients, cooking instruction, and desired outcomes like your taste, texture, and so on when you are cooking. Now, the requirements traceability matrix, one thing I said earlier is that every requirement, every expectation, every need of the stakeholders must align with the primary goals and objectives of that particular project. So if it is a business that this project is being initiated for, all stakeholders' needs, expectations must align with the business or national goals. If they are for economic purposes, then we must make sure that those things are well defined. Now, what the traceability matrix does is this, and it makes it simple. So what you have is that the traceability matrix tries to align each stakeholder objective, each stakeholder requirement, each stakeholder need to the ultimate goal of the project. So if the stakeholder says, I want a return of 50 million naira as my investment in this project, the project manager in his business domain, business acumen, want to align this project. Is it meant for return on investment profit? If there is profit maximization, then he will link that particular expectation to profit maximization. If the stakeholder says, what we want is sustainability, he will look at the business goal. Is sustainability, is business continuity and sustainability anywhere part of the objective? Then he will link the two. If the business stakeholder says, I want this project that by the end of this project, I should have my children and people that I will recommend to get job, then it will try to link it. Does this make provision for job creation for members of families? So that linkage, that is called traceability, trying to link project objectives to the ultimate objectives. I hope you understand that. So by the time you do your traceability matrix, the document gives you a balance between what is expected of the stakeholders and what the ultimate goal is. So everybody's need is captured in the ultimate goal. Although this does not mean that every request, every need of the stakeholder must automatically be captured. Remember, there is a place for change requests, approved changes, rejected changes. So these are the things you have to now put in place. For instance, you remember, there were two business tycoons in Nigeria. I'm not going to call names, but I trust you, you should be able to fathom who they are. One of them wanted to buy a higher share of that particular international conglomerate so that he will become the chairman of the board. And the other one, instead of allowing him to buy more shares, now relinquished his shares. They rather allowed him to sell off his shares to other members of the public and any other person who is interested in becoming part of the board than him becoming the board chairman. What have they done? They are telling you now, as far as this project is concerned, we cannot link your expectation to the ultimate goal of this organization. That's what they just said. Okay, so this matrix traces each requirement back to its source and ensures that all stakeholders' needs are documented and addressed. Think of a table linking each ingredient or step into the recipe to the stakeholder who requested it or the reason for its inclusion. Okay, so I've talked about updates on the project management. Now, do you have any question on this traceability, or do you have questions or requirements documentation? If you have a question, please let me know. If you have any question, the mic is open. You can go ahead and ask me. Okay, Ms. Ebere, your microphone is on. Do you have a question for me?
No.
Okay.
I do have a quick question, please.
Okay, please go ahead, sir.
Just to be clear, the collect requirement is a process under the project scope management, right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so let's go to the next one. The next process here will be developing scope statement, or what we refer to as defined scope. By defining scope, we just want to be sure that all of us understand ourselves, the stakeholders, the project team members, the project manager, everybody understand themselves. That's what we want to do with the scope definition. Everybody, we're on the same page, we understand ourselves, no disagreement and what have you. That's what we want to do. Now, the defined scope process, also known as the developed scope statement, is a crucial step within the project scope statement. It is where you take all the gathered requirements and translate them into a clear and concise document that outlines exactly what the project will deliver. Imagine this as finalizing the menu for your restaurant, listing the dishes offered and any exclusion, and everybody agrees and say, yes, this is what we want to do. Then you can continue. The input here will include the collected requirements that we took from our stakeholders, the project management plan, and then you have your organizational process assets. All these will form the inputs for your defined scope. Now, the tools and techniques here, we need the brainstorming and meetings, just to be sure that we're able to make clarity and concise definition of what and where we're going. Then the requirement prioritization. Yes, we don't expect that all the requirements we weigh the same. Everybody's expectation, everybody's needs will be the same. And that's where the traceability matrix comes in. So you can use things like the weighted scoring and prioritize the requirement so that you know, when we are dealing with stakeholders in the early stages of this class, we talked about high impact stakeholders, moderate impact stakeholders, and then low impact stakeholders. So with your requirement prioritization, you know which of the impact will be high, or which of the requirements will be high, or should be given high impact value. Then you now look at the ones that will also be given moderate impact value, and then the ones with what do you call it? Low impact value. Now you also need your product breakdown structure. In your product breakdown structure or product identification, you should be able to come up with exactly what expected product we want to see at the end of the day. So this can be helpful for complex projects to break down the deliverables into hierarchical structure. Why not always used for defining scope? It can be relevant for complex menus with various components. Okay. Then you have your expert judgment coming in also in this particular tool and technique in defining the scope. You need the expert to guide you to give you advisory on how your project definition should go. Then on the output, we expect the scope statement, a concise statement of what the project is targeted at achieving. It outlines the approved project scope, including major deliverables, inclusions, assumptions, and constraints. Remember that scope is about what is included and only what is included in the project. Scope is about what is included and only what is included. So you can say it's about what is included and what is excluded in the project. Okay. So we also have our updates on the project documents. Now take note that just like a well-defined menu sets expectation for your restaurant patrons, a well-defined scope statement ensures everyone involved in the project understand its boundaries and deliverables. This is very, very important. Now, the next process we'll look at is the create WBS. Create WBS, that's work breakdown structure. This breaks down the project deliverables into smaller, more manageable components. Imagine creating an outline that breaks down the play into acts, scenes, individual dialogue sessions, all the way down to the specific props needed for each scene. This is what your work is doing. Now, imagine writing a book. Imagine writing a book. You have chapter 1. Then you have 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. They have chapter 2, 2.1, 2.2. That's what you want to do with your project. You want to break it down to the smallest manageable units. Okay. Now, here is a breakdown of create WBS process. Number 1, identify the deliverables. Remember that your deliverables are the expected results. It could be end products, it could be services, it could be transitions, whatever thing it might be, just know that you need to identify them. By the time you identify your deliverables, okay, then you'll be able to break down your project into what we call phases. The major milestones in the project will determine the phases in the project. Now, the phases will determine the tasks involved in the project. Let me go back to the book, writing the book as an example. So I have the title of the book, that's my project. Then I have chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 6. Those are the major deliverables. Those are the expected deliverables in the project. Or will I say, in this case, when I say deliverables, I'm talking about the milestones. I should be able to do chapter 1, chapter 2, down to the last chapter. Now, in chapter 1, I have chapter 1.1, chapter 1.2, chapter 1.3. Now, if the chapter 1 comprises of up to 5, 7, till n number of items under it, that means I must finish all those sub-units, sub-titles under chapter 1 before I could say chapter 1 is complete. I will do the same for chapter 2, chapter 3, to chapter n. Okay, that's the same thing we are doing with identifying the deliverable. Then number 2 is for you to break down the deliverable. So I've just talked about breaking it down now. You have the title of the book, you chapterize it, and then you have the different units under the chapters. Then continue breakdown to further smaller units like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. Then apply the 100% rule. The 100% rule simply means that by the time you aggregate everything under this breakdown, it should be able to give you the whole. If you aggregate chapter 1 with all of the chapter 1.1, chapter 2, chapter 1.n, you do the same to chapter 2. By the time you aggregate all, it should give you the book that you want to write. That's the 100% rule. Addition of the smaller units will give you the sum of the whole. Okay. To ensure that all the sub-components like the child elements completely sum up to the parent element above them. Okay. Now, here are some additional tips for creating an effective WBS. Effective tips. Use a hierarchical numbering system. So I gave an example now. You have chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. Under chapter 1, you have 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. If you must go on breaking them further, you have chapter 1.1, chapter 1.2, chapter 1.3, chapter 1. chapter 1.1.1, chapter 1.1.2, dependent on how you want it, but it must be in hierarchical order. Then the next one is ensure mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. So this is a big grammar, but this big grammar simply applies to the 100% rule. Okay, each of the tasks should be well carried out. Each of the tasks should be well carried out. They should be done very well. And all of them coming together should give you the sum total of what is expected. So the subcomponents should not overlap in responsibility. That's being mutually exclusive. And together they should encompass all the work required to deliver the parent element. That's the being collectively exhaustive. For example, set construction for a scene shouldn't include tasks related to costume design. So if you want to deal with chapter 1, let all the elements there consign to chapter 1. When you get to chapter 2, let all the elements consign to chapter 2. Chapter 3, the same thing, you get to chapter N. Use a level of detail appropriate for the project. Like I said, if your project requires that you break down your WBS to 1.1, or just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to N, that's perfect. If that is the way, the most appropriate way to break down your work. If it is 1, then under it you have 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. That is also good, provided you understand what you're doing. And that is the best way to go about it. If it is 1, then you have 1.1.1, 1.1.2, 1.1.3. If that's the way that works perfectly for that project, according to the breakdown, then go on. If it is the one that goes 1, then you have 1.1.1.1.1, 1.1.1.2. Just go according to the best way, but try as much as you can to make your breakdown simple and understandable so that you don't confuse not only yourself, but other members of your team members. So the WBS shouldn't be too granular or too high level. It should provide enough detail for effective project management without becoming overwhelming. Now, benefit of a WBS provides clarity, improved clarity, enhances communication. There is better work breakdown that everybody can understand, and people understand what the work packages are, and they're able to pick them up and do them even with little or no supervision. Then it helps in accurate estimate. Yes. Remember that one of the benefits of scope is that it helps us to come up with estimates. So if you have a WBS that is well structured, it makes estimates more accurate. Okay, you don't deal with cumbersome things. You now deal with the bits of the project. So it's easier for you to say, okay, for this bit, it is this amount, for that bit, it is this amount. Okay, and then by the time you go ahead and apply the 100% rule, summing all of them together, we end up giving you the entire project budget. Okay. Remember, the WBS is a living document and can be updated as the project progresses. It is a collaborative effort, so involve key stakeholders in the WBS component process to ensure alignment and understanding. Now, what are the inputs? You need your project scope statement. Now that the project is well defined and everybody knows where we're going to, it is a good one that we need the project scope statement so that we can break down the project as need be. Then we have what we call the WBS dictionary, although we said here it's optional, but remember we talked about taking initiative. So if you think you need a project, a WBS dictionary, why not? A WBS dictionary is like providing, is it indices or glossary? So you have done your project, but you want to provide additional information to provide clarity. So you can go to appendix and provide glossary, provide indices, provide appendix, as the case may be. That will become your WBS dictionary. Your WBS dictionary is just to provide, if you use any terminology, if you used any methodology during your breakdown that you think there is not enough space to explain it within the context or within the space allowed for you to break down your project, you can go to the WBS dictionary and explain those things so that anybody who needs understanding can be referred to the thing written, okay, or those things written. Then you have your OPAs, as the case may be. Here you need your templates, you need your procedures, you need your policies, standards that must be followed to make sure that the WBS is in line. Now, the tools and techniques, you have the composition. The composition can be done manually. When your team is brainstorming, they can break down the project according to their understanding. Another thing you can also do, like I said in the first class, in this area of generative AI, you can use AI to break down the project. However, the AI tool should give you only a clue. You shouldn't just define everything yourself. You shouldn't just define everything for you. You should also use your own initiative to make adjustments that will make your work easier, smarter, and well to do. Okay. Then you have the mind mapping, which is the visual brainstorming technique that can help organize ideas and identify potential subcomponents of the deliverable. Sometimes all you need to do to take care of a project breakdown is to close your eyes and visualize the project. Where the mind mapping is not giving you what you want, you might have to look for templates, project template from other sources. Okay. And so you have the expert judgment tool also needed. You can ask an expert to advise. And then you need the project software, project management software tools. They can also help. On the output, you have your work breakdown structure, which is a hierarchical definition of all of the work that you need to do. And then you have your WBS dictionary, which is optional. Okay, additional considerations, your 100% rule, no matter what you do in your WBS, your 100% rule must apply. All the smaller components must all join together to give us the whole. And then the mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive, the MECE rule must also apply. The sub-components should not overlap. Okay, every aspect must have their well-defined rules and responsibilities. So there should be no overlap to avoid conflicts. And then they must all encompass their work. They must all come together to give result of the parent work, or give the result, the totally expected result. Note, just like a clear blueprint guides construction workers, a well-defined WBS helps project teams understand their roles and responsibilities, leading to a successful project outcome. Do I have any questions so far? I'm just a step away to completing today's class. Any questions so far? Any comments? If there's something you need me to explain, I will gladly do so. Okay, if there is none for now, let me quickly go to scope verification. Remember where we started from in the scope process. We started with collecting requirements. Now, I don't want you to live without understanding the practical implication of what we're saying. Collecting requirements simply means that there is nobody in the state considered as a stakeholder that is insignificant. Everybody's voice counts. That's what we are saying when we say collect requirement. So we want to hear what everybody says, no matter who they are, no matter their level, their involvement and everything counts. So let's gather them, let's hear them out, let's negotiate with them. That's what we are saying with collect requirement. So that is like collaborative decision making. When you say collect requirement, what you're doing is more like collaborative decision, so that by the end of the day, nobody will say, I was not involved, I didn't know what happened, these people came and usurped us, and things like that. From there, having known exactly what the stakeholders want, we now went on to do what we call scope definition. We defined exactly, all of us defined it. We presented it back to the stakeholders. Everybody said yes. So through agreement, we said, yes, this is what we want. And we also made sure that every stakeholder's need aligns with the ultimate project goal. And that was very perfect. Everybody said, yes, this is exactly what we need. The project team has been doing a very great work. They were not sleeping. They made sure that the stakeholders, from the scratch, they are carried along. Then from that point of defining the scope, they now went on to break down the project so that it will be easier for them in the project team to execute. They don't really need to take this now to all of the stakeholders to start approval afresh. No, there are some high-level stakeholders that they can show this to us. Okay, based on what the stakeholders have said, these are the tasks we think we need to do to it. It's okay, that's perfect. They are still communicating with everyone. And now they want to verify this scope. They've broken down the scope, they want to verify it. So they want to take it back to the stakeholders, get consent or get suggestions, advice from some experts, review other templates and be sure that they are on track. Remember that this was scope verification process. We are doing this to make sure that the project implementation goes successfully. And also we reduce the risk of abrupt changes. We don't want disruptions that will alter the project. We don't want disruptions that will alter the project. That's what we are looking out for. All right. So let's go on to verifying the scope. Scope verification ensures that everyone is on the same page. Here, you formally confirm that the defined scope is aligned with the stakeholders' expectations. Think of holding a table read with actors and directors to ensure everyone understands their roles and the overall plot. It is like a dress rehearsal for your play, where you confirm that all the actors, props, and sets are ready and aligned with the director's vision, which is the project scope. What's the purpose of project scope verification? Formally confirm that the defined project scope is aligned with the stakeholders' expectation. Ensure that all project deliverables are clearly understood and agreed upon by the stakeholders involved. Identify any potential scope creep in case there is uncontrolled enlargement, uncontrolled expansion, uncontrolled growth of the project scope. We should be able to identify it early. So when the scope begins to grow or expand beyond what we agreed on, it's called scope creep. Okay, scope creep. The benefits: there is reduced risk of scope creep, there is enhanced stakeholder satisfaction, there is improved project management. Now, what are the inputs? On the verified scope, you have the project scope statement, you have the project management plan, you have the project deliverables, expected project deliverables. On the tools and techniques, you have reviews and meetings, you have inspections, you have demonstrations. On the output, you have signed off project scope statement and updates to project document. So you also have what we call the project scope baseline. You can add that to your verified scope. You have what we call the project scope baseline. That's now the approved scope, the one that every member of the stakeholder community agrees that, yes, this is good for us. Okay. Remember, by effectively following, or remember that effective communication with stakeholders is key throughout the verification process. Scope verification is not a one-time activity. It can be revisited through the project lifecycle, throughout the project lifecycle. All right. Now, let's look at the last process in the project scope management. And that is where we are going to be drawing the curtain for the day, which is the control scope. Control scope is an ongoing process that assures the project stays focused on delivering what was agreed upon. Imagine it as managing last-minute requests from the director or audience during your play's run. You need to assess the impact, get approvals, and make adjustments without derailing the entire performance, which is the project. Why is scope control important? Uncontrolled scope creep, the addition of new features or changes beyond the original scope, can be detrimental to the project success. It can be detrimental to the budget, to the schedule, and can bring delay. It can lead to delays, budget overruns, ultimately unhappy stakeholders, and you don't want to have that. The benefit of scope control is that there is reduced risk, there is improved project predictability. So if the project is going this way or that way, you should be able to know. Since scope creep is already taken care of, you can predict when the project can finish, possible outcomes expected, the possible budget it will take, and all of that. They have enhanced stakeholder satisfaction, delivering as promised. Now, what are the key activities here? The key activities: monitor scope performance. Scope is the work to be done, so monitor the performance. Number two is identify the possible changes that will come up, and then be sure to deal with them proactively. Remember that changes on themselves are risks, so you need to provide proactive means of dealing with them. Then impact, assess the impact of these changes. Where you need to approve, you approve. Where you need to reject, you reject. Remember that. Manage the scope changes as the case may be. Develop formal process for handling scope. This may involve obtaining approvals from stakeholders, documenting the changes, and updating project plans accordingly. Now, what are the inputs of your project management plan, your project scope statement, work performance data, and change requests? Then on the tools and techniques, you have your performance reviews. Remember that what you're doing is controlling the scope. So review will help you to be in control. Then you have variance analysis. If there are deviations, you will find out. If there are variations, you will find out. So variance analysis, you know where you are. If there is derailing, you'll find out using variance analysis. The same thing will apply with the trend analysis. If there is going to be a scope creep growing beyond what we initially planned out, you will find out with your trend analysis. If you see the progression of the project, you can predict if there is going to be a creep in the future of the project. Then you have the integrated change control processes. They can serve as wonderful means of controlling the scope. On the output, we have updates to project documents, updates to your project management plan, your scope statement, your WBS, your schedule. All of this might be updated. Then you have your performance reports to know if there are variations with the baselines, the scope baseline, the cost baseline, the schedule baseline. You check if there are baselines, and then you recommend corrective actions. And then you also have your change log requests. Your change log request is a composition of all the requested changes, okay? Not necessarily the approved ones. So there you'll find the ones that have the potential to be approved and the potential to be rejected. Remember, communication is key. Keep stakeholders informed about potential scope changes and their impact. Be firm but flexible. Manage requests effectively, balancing stakeholder needs with project constraints. By effectively implementing control scope practices, you can ensure your project stays on track and delivers the agreed upon scope. And this is where we're going to call it a time out for today's class. If there's question, comment, contributions, I'll be glad to take them right now. Please, any question, any contribution, go ahead.